Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon. Today, I'll be just sharing with you the different technologies that we are using in South Africa to deal with disaster management. I come from the Gauteng province, the province with 3 major cities that are leading in South Africa, with one, which is the city of Johannesburg, that is the 4th largest economy in Africa. Can I need someone. To run. To run the presentation. Yes. How do you run it? Just like this. No? Okay. No, it's fine. We've got it right now. I thought it's important that we start with the challenges that are facing us, but also just to zoom into the issues that relates to disaster risk reduction, moving from reaction to prevention. There is a question there which is something that one should take into account. The question that we should ask ourselves, whether we are in the most dangerous world or in the safe one. To respond to this question will help us to actually deploy the necessary technologies that we need for us to be able to respond to disasters. Firstly is the IT system. That is quite important. That was never there before, that we can use it now to respond to disasters. And secondly is the data. How we use the data that is in our disposal as cities as well as countries, to be able to make sure that we manipulate the data to be able to respond to the needs of communities. The other point that I think is important is how to educate our people. Most of the people, especially from Africa, where I come from, you find that most of the communities are not well versed with what is happening in the world, especially the issues that relate to disaster management. In Africa, if I may say, Program Director, is that we do have traditional communities under traditional authorities, and there you may not have councils that deal with some of the issues. So it's important that we also educate the citizen about the disasters and their far-reaching implications for their livelihood. And lastly, it is quite important to note that the benefits of vulnerability reduction are greater exceeds the cost. So it's important that we begin to deal with this issue. These are the drivers of the ICT revolution in the disaster risk reduction. I don't want to delve much on HYOCO framework for action, the 2005 to 2015 one, which was signed in Kobe World Conference. The second one is the United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainability Development, the COP21, which is still new and fresh in our minds, the 2016 Habitat 3 that was held in Quito a week ago. What is key here is that disaster reduction calls for new partnership that draws stakeholders together for all levels of society across sectors and regions. It's important that we work together on this particular issue, but these are the reference points for us to be able to develop and deploy ICTs to deal with the issues that relates to disaster management. What is key before I go to the case study of South Africa are those things that we need to manage, are those things that are still prevalent today that we need to deal with. I call them the hurdle to jump. In 2011 mid-term review of HYOCO framework for action, what was shown there is that countries are still experiencing some challenges with regard to the utilization of technology to deal with disasters. And of course, early this year, we were in Geneva on the conference that deals with disaster risk reduction, and this was confirmed there, that as countries we have got our own challenges, And of course, there are things that we need to deal with to make sure that we respond to the current disasters. But some of the prevailing challenges that are facing us is that citizens in poor countries and marginalized communities are substantially more exposed to and vulnerable to natural disasters. There is a lack of political and public awareness and inadequate institutional mechanisms and technical capacities to deal with some of these issues. But of course, the issue of funding, which was raised earlier, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we need more funding to deal with our own issues and to deal with issues of urban planning. The lack of relevant institutional framework and policies for science and technology, high cost of some of the technologies, which also prevent accessibility and make sure that people are able to use the facilities that are available before us. Lack of data. It's important that when you want to deal with disasters, you have a baseline information. And in most of the countries, as well as in sub-Saharan Africa, we don't have baseline information. And every time we deal with these issues, we find it so difficult for us to deal with some of the hazards and the exposures that are before us. Of course, our communities are vulnerable, and we have to make sure that we build capacity, especially in areas that have got quite a lot of people that are illiterate. These are the common natural disasters. I'm not going to deal with them. I just want to go to the case study of South Africa. I think you'll deal with that section on your own. This is the map of South Africa. Where I've zoomed in, this is Africa on top and South Africa is at the bottom. South Africa is at the tip of Southern Hemisphere, where both Indian and Atlantic Ocean meet, and it is prone to natural disasters such as floods, wildfires, drought, and to a certain extent tornadoes. I can say that in terms of wildfires, they are prevalent mostly in the Western Cape. The Coliquas here come from Western Cape, especially around the Table Mountain. In 2005, we had wildfires in that part of the country, which cost us 11 million, covering 11,800 hectares. Earthquake, it is not common in South Africa, but of course, we did have one that was actually the biggest mining-related earthquake in the area of Orkney in the Northwest Province. It was costly, but only had 1 death and 34 injuries. Floods that are prevalent in the provinces of Gauteng, where I come from, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Free State, Northwest, and Northern Cape. We do experience severe flooding as a result of heavy rains, which normally lead to the loss of lives, of course, displacement of people and destruction of public infrastructure. The drought, that's experience that we're facing now. In fact, the minister has already declared 8 provinces as a disaster because of drought. Gauteng, we are also experiencing drought because of the low rainfall. As when we left the country, we're busy putting together measures, talking to the communities. We've already introduced water restrictions to 15% and making sure that we observe how communities actually utilize water, because there is high temperature that we're experiencing. Tornado is also rare, but of course in July we did experience one in the area of Goruleni. It's a municipality or a metropole that specializes on aerotropolis. That's where the main city, the main airport is. In South Africa, we have codified the disaster management. It is contained in the Constitution, is also contained in the pieces of legislation. Even the intergovernmental structures are codified to make sure that there is an integrated way of working between national, subnational, and local sphere of government. So everything that we do is codified, is contained in the regulations and is contained in the pieces of legislation to make sure that we guide the process and we guide how provinces and national government interact to deal with the disasters that may affect the country. There are different number of actual technologies that we use. We do use mobile devices, the radio and social media, of course. That's what everyone has access to make sure that we communicate to people about impending disasters. What I've decided to do is to make sure that I enlist quite a number of technologies for the benefit of everyone, to know that we do have these devices, and of course we can also employ them in your cities. We've got GEM3 and Semen technologies, which is used by the city of Ukuruleni and the city of Nelson Mandela. They use these for disaster management, record management, and call taking, which is quite important because we must have the records. But also we use Tetra radio to link with the South African police, because when we have disasters, we will deploy the police officers which are under the ambit of national and provincial government. The cities as well as local municipalities have got metro police, but we most rely on the SAPS, South African Police Services. We also use the incident and emergency disaster management as a call taking, but also to dispatch system that is used in the Western District. This is a district that is located in the southern corridor of Gauteng, which will be a metro in 5 years' time. We just had elections, and next elections will be in 2021, and we hope that West Rand will be a metro at the time. We do use the geographic information system, and this is widely used in the whole country and allows for real-time monitoring for emergency early warnings as well as modeling of probabilities, because it's important to know what is likely to happen. Without the GIS systems, it will be quite difficult for us to be able to know whether there will be a particular disaster and what will be the intensity of that disaster. We do use the flood monitoring sensor status ARS to monitor weather conditions. And this system is used by the city of Johannesburg, the biggest city in South Africa and also in Africa. In terms of the mobile phone application, I can report to this house that we have an academic from University of Free State who came up with a device to assist the small-scale farmers to decide as to when to plant. And I think the issue of agriculture is quite important, and it was also said earlier in this gathering. So she has managed to come up with a tool to assist the farmers to be able to actually predict whether there will be a rainfall or there will be a drought. And the tool that is used for it can predict drought for 4 years in advance. Now it's used in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, in South Africa, in Mozambique and Lesotho. And we hope that the very same tool will be used by other countries and any other person who want to access it, and make sure that we use it to assist the farmers. The next one is the two-way radio, which is quite important to communicate and coordinate the efforts to respond to disasters and also reduce the post-disaster impact on communities. And it's always quite important that when there have been disasters, we are able to respond with speed and reduce the impact so that we are able to reconstruct our cities. The radio and television is widely used, and satellite radio. The e-convener, it's used by the provinces mostly to coordinate the intergovernmental relations. In South Africa, we have legislations that regulate the intergovernmental relations, how the three spheres of government interact and operate. And within that legislation, we have come up with what we call e-convener to coordinate all the structures from the three spheres of government. Now that we have drought, we are able to use these structures to coordinate, because the center must hold and be able to make sure that the citizens, they get service in a seamless way. The members of the community, they don't care whether we have got three spheres of government, that the service they get must come from government, and it must come in a seamless way. We do have intelligent incident management portal, and this is the portal that is based on cloud computing solution for improvement of operation and incident management. The incident command system, as well as the early warning system. This one is quite important, and I think it's important to share it with you. We have what we call South African National Space Agency, which uses the satellite imagery to predict or forecast flood zones, as well as assist with disaster damages assessment, and also deal with post-disaster verification. What we normally do, we do verification when there's been disaster so that we are able to coast a disaster and be able to respond. We do have advanced fire information system. This provides early warning for failed fires incidents and measure the distance and magnitude of the fire. As I indicate that there are certain sections in our country that have got failed fires like the Western Cape. The South African weather system, we do have an institution which is called South African Weather Services. It assists the whole country to predict the weather conditions. It does forecast for everyone and be able to communicate information to all the institutions of the state and communities and NGOs to be able to respond. The tsunami early warning system receives tsunami warnings for countries' coastline areas. We do have coastline areas being the three provinces, the Western Cape where the Cape Town is, the Eastern Cape where Mandela came from, as well as KwaZulu-Natal. So this warning system assists those coastline provinces to be able to understand whether there will be a tsunami, but we have never actually experienced one as a country, but it's important that we are ready if it does happen. We also have a Council for Geoscience, which deals with C2 seismic monitoring tool with real-time and warnings for seismic events. In certain areas of the country, we have got areas that are dolomitic and are experiencing problems. So we use this council also to test the soil and just check the extent of the damages that might take place in the soil, so for us to be able to avoid or maybe advise a municipality not to develop a particular area. Because we are a water-scarce country, we do have a dam level monitoring system to determine and monitor dam levels during droughts and flood situations. And this is what we're using now. The normalized difference vegetation index and the fell fire danger rating system and emergency call taking and dispatch systems. So these systems exist in our country, and I think it would be important that you also try some of them and see whether they won't help you. Because when there is a disaster, especially when there are floods and there are fires, that poses a threat on food security. So it's important to actually try and develop and deploy some of the vegetation index systems just to make sure that we monitor the impact or the likely impact on the agriculture. I thought it's important that I must also share this with you. Not long ago, we're in Shanghai with Huawei. There was a conference on these tools, and this is what we are exploring as Gauteng now, but of course I think other provinces will be deploying them. These are the platforms that must be used for the communication with people, especially to make sure that you have voice, data, and video. Most of the time you find that our system do not have video and we cannot see what is happening when there are problems. In my country, there are always protests. You have a right to protest, but not actually to destroy properties. And when you deal with man-made disasters, it's important that when you deploy people to a particular area, they are able to communicate and you are able to see what's happening so that you ready yourself to be able to reduce the impact of the disasters. Not long ago, even now, we're still having the protests by students at university demanding free education, and they've titled it Fees Must Fall. And they've shut down all the institutions of higher learning. And in that case, there's no way you can deploy emergency people or the police or the army to that area without video surveillance. Your tools and the systems that you have must have voice and data, but also make sure that you are able to take pictures so that when you deploy people, you are ready to do so. These are some of the platforms that you can consider. But what is also key, which is something that we're trying to deal with as a country, is to use the Disaster Management Center as a command center. That is quite important because we are able to actually link up all the strategic point and national key point to the command center, and also link the justice cluster to be able to respond to different disasters. All what we are saying in conclusion is that it is not always possible to avoid disasters because natural disasters are inevitable. But there are actually tools that we can use to reduce the impact of the disasters on the communities. The neglect of scientific knowledge and technology can cause great loss of life, severe property losses, and far-reaching economic and political consequences. And I think as mayors will understand what I'm talking about when I talk about political consequences. And we need to make sure that we do not lose credibility. Let's use these tools at our disposal. So it is therefore important that as countries and cities, we mobilize the existing scientific and technical operation organizations, particularly through Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, to fully implement the Hyoko framework for action. This should be coupled with a well-informed and equipped population and a good political leadership in order to minimize the adverse impact of disasters. And in closing, I think this is quite important that you do need a consolidated IT platform such as integrated communication platforms, the broadband communication systems, the cloud and big data, the video surveillance, as well as the converged command and control center, which I spoke about, in order to ensure that the appropriate intelligence gathering, the real-time action, and post-event investigation is undertaken in pursuit of safe cities. This is what we call a new era of public safety. As we in pursuit of what we call safe cities, it's important that we deploy these technologies for us to protect the communities. As Gauteng, we're already establishing a high-tech disaster management center which will serve as a command center, and this system will be installed. And I think when we meet again, I will be to share with you and demonstrate to you what is it that we are doing. Before I leave the stage, I want to share this that was said by the great man Mahatma Gandhi, who said speed is relevant if we are going in the wrong direction. So let's take a right direction and move with speed. Thank you very much.